channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back with you on this beautiful Sunday evening/night with 20 minutes past the hour of 11 p.m. East African time when we are coming to you live from Uganda. Karim Ademi has scored to make it 2-0 in favor of Barcelona against Elche. That game is still ongoing. The first goal was scored by Rafinha around the 15th minute from the penalty spot in that one. Then earlier on, there was a 2-all draw between Villarreal and Atletico de Madrid in as far as the Spanish La Liga is concerned. Good evening, Boss Royal. How are you doing? I'm fine, thanks. Hi, Viola. How's been your Sunday? Anyways, so it's today we'll get to talk about Man City, who had to leave it late to win 2-1 against FC Bournemouth. We'll talk about Liverpool, who equally left it late as they picked up a point from St. James's Park in a 2-all draw, a late penalty scored or converted by Dominic Szoboszlai in what literally was the last kick of the game, in a game where, Liverpool appeared to struggle to deal with Newcastle's counterattacks. Then there's been plenty of action. Aston Villa got demolished by Brighton. Aston Villa were reduced to 10 men in the course of that game. Congratulations to Maresca. There's a whole host of Chelsea fans who still have a love affair with Enzo Maresca, and it will be interesting to see whether they will be rooting for him when Manchester City come up against Chelsea. That will be interesting because last season some Chelsea fans rooted for Man City to beat Chelsea because they thought it would deny Arsenal the Premier League title. So it will be an interesting dynamic to observe or to sort of follow up on in the context of football, as often is. So indulge me as I have my audience tested just to make sure everything checks out really well before we proceed or carry on in this broadcast. But yeah, I think we're good to go. So it's always interesting, especially things involving double standards, when they involve double standards. Boss Royal says score prediction for Chelsea tomorrow. Do I even remember? I think I gave Chelsea to win 3-1. I think I went with a 3-1 victory for Chelsea. He will be sacked by Manchester City. You add that Maresca is a snake. I don't know what causes you to say that, but as a Chelsea fan, I can understand because he stepped down from the job. But anyway, his reasons for stepping down perhaps were valid. You may not see it that way, but they are there nonetheless. Then I can say, hopefully we beat the snake. He derailed our season. He jumped ship. Well, he did not choose his successor. At least there's that. And part of him jumping the ship was caused by you guys. So you cannot entirely blame it on him. Part of it was caused by Man City. You said, no, it was not valid. He wanted the Man City job. Be that as of it may, he would have still seen Chelsea through the remainder of the season and still ended up at Manchester City. So, because at the end of the day, Man City had to pay compensation fee to appoint him. So that's why his appointment or official announcement was eventually delayed. Maresca needs to shine. That's from Viola. Come on, man. I mean, no, it was caused by us. Chelsea board wanted him to say, yeah. You see, just because people want you to stay does not mean that the conditions available to you permit you to stay. I'll give you an example. You can be in a marriage where your partner is abusive, either emotionally, psychologically, financially, depending, or physically. And that in itself, just because they still love you, doesn't mean that the conditions are perfect for you to stay in the marriage. So it could be like he had, at the end of the day, he had his reasons. That's why I was saying, whether you acknowledge those reasons or not, that is a whole different story, you know. And then you guys had this whole interference between the coaching department and the medical department, because Chelsea apparently run an independent medical department. And he saw that instead of him perhaps getting in the way, he would rather leave and let people do things the way they saw fit. You know, there was this whole, reports that he was being urged to play some players even when he did not want to. And in the end, it caused all, these sorts of rifts. And eventually, he deemed that the perhaps the place had become a little too toxic for his liking, so he decided to step away. There's basically the point I'm trying to make. There is no way he resigned because of nothing. It was because of something. Whether the reasons that were reported in the media were the gospel truth for what they were or otherwise, because sometimes there is what is fed to the public and what actually happens behind closed doors that causes people to make certain decisions. I'm not saying that what was told to us is the Quran truth or the biblical truth of what exactly happened, you know. So I do not want to paint that picture, really. Viola is saying PSG 2, 2-2. I noticed that game, only that I only have one device on which I can watch games. So I'm a bit limited. In terms of accessing most of these games at the start. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm a bit sort of limited in regards to how much I can access. I wanted to watch that game, even the game again between AC Milan, because AC Milan were in action. So, but unfortunately for me, Stade Rennes 2 and Paris Saint-Germain 2, that game is ongoing. AC Milan are leading Torino by 2-0. I wanted to watch that game, but then I also had the Barcelona game. So I opted to watch Barcelona as opposed to watching AC Milan, because I only have one device to access, the games. I don't know. I tried to watch with my machine, but games are buffering. I don't know whether it's the platform that I've been using or it's a me thing in terms of my bandwidth, internet being poor. But yeah. Oh. So really, I'll try. Yeah, Barcelona 2-0 up. That's at halftime. A very, very interesting game against Elche. Karim Adeyemi on target, as well as Rafinha. Very, very, very interesting stuff to watch. You have Rafinha in there playing as the false nine kind of thing. So let me see. Boss Royal. Okay, Cairo said Maresca was not good at Chelsea. I don't know why people are hyping so much. Well, you say was not good? I'll debate that, and I'll beg to argue to the contrary. When you say it was not good, define not good. It is okay for you to say not good enough, or not elite, or not exceptional, but not good? I'll say he was good. One, he comes in at the start of the 2024-2025, when Chelsea had finished in one place. I remember not what position Chelsea had finished in the season prior. I think, yes, I think around, was it 5th or 6th? Around 5th. Around 6th, yeah, they finished 6th under the charges of Mauricio Pochettino. So subsequently, they had qualified for the UEFA Conference League. Then he comes in his debut campaign. He posts a tally of 69 points, which saw Chelsea finish 4th. And remember, their ambition was to get back in the Champions League, so mission accomplished. I do not think any one of us out there genuinely thought that in his debut campaign, coming from Leicester City, he was going to win Chelsea the Premier League title. It wasn't impossible. I mean, he tried. At some point, we had Chelsea in the conversation for the Premier League title, but eventually, it was not an overall expectation that we had right from the onset. Then, he went on and won Chelsea the UEFA Conference League. Maybe that was expected because Chelsea had arguably had the best team in the UEFA Conference League that campaign, beating Real Betis, I think, by 4 goals to 1 in the final. Then he went to the quote-unquote almost invitational expanded new FIFA Club World Cup in the USA in the summer of 2025, and he won it. On the course of it, beating Paris Saint-Germain in the final. That's why Chelsea, on their jerseys, donned that golden badge of FIFA as the World Club champions. Now, in my perspective, when I look at his report card of the debut campaign, I thought he did excellently well to buy himself all the timely capital that he needed to carry him through the second season, regardless of how things went. Because Rome wasn't built in one day, as you can tell. So he comes into his second season, and I stand to be corrected, but my memory or my recollection is Chelsea, or is of Chelsea having a good start to the season. Now, you can debate all sorts of things, but after 10 games played, Chelsea found themselves 7th with 17 points. That was approximately 8 points behind the then table leaders in Arsenal. So then, by the time I think we got to match day 18, Chelsea were 5th with 29 points after match day 18. So, and he was only 3 points behind 4th place Liverpool and about 10 points. Was it 10? Yeah, about 10 points behind Aston Villa. In other words, there was quite a bit of a distance, obviously. But the season wasn't all lost. And then we started hearing all these murmurings of him not being happy. Part of it, why? Apparently, if a player came back from injury, it was the medical department that wanted to dictate how long or how much time he ought to be dedicated in terms of playing time. Usually, from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong on this part, is team doctors or medical departments of clubs work under their managers. Now, with Chelsea's structure, given that Maresca was a head coach, even with that, I still expect the medical department to be under his purview. In other words, if a player is returning from injury, obviously we'll be given a medical report of the player or an assessment. Okay, what was the nature of the injury? It was a groin injury. How long was he out? 4 weeks. How much time has he trained prior to, before being given minutes? Maybe he has spent a week in team training and all that sort of stuff. And then maybe he qualifies for 15 minutes, 30 minutes. That's at the discretion of the manager. But obviously, he's not stupid. He will know that I'm not going to get a player who has been a month out with a groin injury to start a game. So he got dictated terms. I'll give another example. Part of the reports that we did receive were revolving around William Esteval. Now, William Esteval medically has a history of suffering with hamstring injuries. So he wanted to manage his game time. Really, apparently, quote unquote, his bosses or his superiors wanted him to play the boy more regularly or as often as possible to showcase his quality talents. And eventually, the boy suffers a hamstring injury. We know he did not, see out the remainder of the season. That's, I think, how he ended up missing out on the World Cup squad. So obviously, and you remember, prior to playing the game against was it Everton? He mentioned something to the press, like, I think it had been the longest 48 hours in his life at Chelsea. So all that in one package, put that to the side. First and foremost, also, in his contract, he had an obligation to inform the club if any club otherwise approached him to offer him a job. It was a contractual obligation, which he honored first in October 2025, when he informed the club that Manchester City, through intermediaries or third parties, had approached him. Then they returned in December the same year. But that notwithstanding, obviously the club was not happy about that. But it's like you being mad at your girlfriend or wife that another man approached them. First of all, it's not their fault that that person approached them. You get the point. Whether they know that that person is married or not, that's a whole different story. But the other party approached your partner first. So you must have the discernment to say it is not their fault that they've been approached. However, what they do after they've been approached, that is in their control. That is in their control. If they say yes, that's in their control. If they say no, that's in their control. If they tell you about it, that's under their control. You know? So it was a combination of factors that were being reported. Obviously, there's a lot that happens behind the scenes that we do not know about, that never gets reported. Even the managers, not the managers, even the journalists that work for Sky Sports, Telegraph, The Athletic, all these connected guys that have sources in and around the club that report on different things will tell you for a fact that they can never know everything that is happening internally in the club. So what we got was that, at least that was the narrative being driven. And like I said, it's not gospel truth. It is subject to debate. But for now, we make the assessment based on the information before us. We cannot speculate beyond what happened behind the scenes. I know for an absolute fact that his bosses wanted him to stay in January before he stepped down. They wanted him to stay, you know? So, but like I said, perhaps in his personal assessment, there were circumstances, maybe beyond his control, or that he thought he saw fit that necessitated that he steps down, you know? Meanwhile, Torino have scored to pull one back, so it's 2-1 against AC Milan in that game. Okay, let me revisit some of your comments. So, Cairo, so it all emanates onto comments here. Cairo saying he's not good enough, or he was not a good manager for Chelsea. I've given you my contrary view, why I thought he was good for Chelsea and what he was able to achieve. Going into his second season, those are the problems that were reported to have hindered him or stopped him from continuing in his chosen job. Hi, Rev Caliber. I'm good to have you back on the broadcast. Let me see. Okay. Some of your other comments. Where did I stop? Okay. Boss Royal say you say he knew Pep was leaving and he wanted the job. Simple as that. He could have waited until the end of the season, but he decided to leave mid-season, which completely derailed our season. I do not want to believe that is the case. That first of all, if he had left the club, because it's not like Pep Guardiola left mid-season, you know. 2, why would you leave your current job to get another job that you're guaranteed of getting anyway, even if you wait for months forward? Make it make sense. 3, I don't know whether he knew that it was rest assured that Pep Guardiola was leaving or not, and I will not contest that for its factuality. All I'll say is this: even if he had seen out the season, if it was Man City's plan to make him their head coach, they would have still made him. In other words, he would have simply wrapped up the season and said, unfortunately, here's the end of the road for me with Chelsea at the end of the season. But like I said, he stepped down. If he was stepping down in mid-season to go and take over at Man City, we would still have had that. But that wasn't the case because Pep Guardiola was still in charge. We're talking about a Pep Guardiola who also had a year still left on his current contract. And by the way, as we have come to see in those Amazon documentaries, some of the narrative that was going on around Pep Guardiola, I am not sure even his own dressing room knew for an absolute fact what kind of decision he was going to make. You know, I'll give you another was actually this was according to The Athletic. They reported on one of their podcasts that even some of Manchester City's insiders were not sure what Pep Guardiola was going to do, what decision he was going to take, whether he was going to stay on or he was going to call it quits. However, the decision makers at the top of the food chain wanted to prepare themselves for any eventuality. If he left, they wanted to be prepared. If he stayed for another season, well and good. So that's why they started to speak to Enzo Maresca. And by the way, Enzo Maresca wasn't the only head coach of their shortlist, at least according to The Athletic. There were other two names that did not come out in the glare of the news. So I understand you guys having the disappointment that he left, and even the manner in which he left. But whereas that could be our feeling or your feeling, interrogate the facts for what they were, without necessarily having to tilt the debate to only one side. Okay, you say fake news. All right. If it is your assessment of it that it is fake news, then Viola says Maresca is a good coach when you give him everything. Then PSG. And now, when Viola says when you give him everything, part of what appears to be the case, at least from the onset, is the seemingly that Xabi Alonso looks like or appears to have more authority over the club than his predecessor. In other words, his command on what Chelsea do and do not do, he appears to have more authority than Enzo Maresca had, and at least that's what we are being fed. Okay, Barcelona, okay, we discussed that. Kairos responding to Viola, we will come back next year maybe. Okay, I will be here. He didn't have a style of play, zero. He just won the club the World Cup. Okay, if that's your assessment of it, that he did not have a style of play. But on that part, guys, let's agree on this one. Just because you and I cannot understand something does not mean it doesn't make sense or it is not existent. I'll give you an example. I'm not a lawyer, but those familiar with the law oftentimes say that a lack of evidence is not an absence of evidence. In other words, just because you have failed to find the evidence does not mean it does not exist. So, I do not think for a single minute that there is a manager without a style of play, without a philosophy. Just because you and I do not understand it does not mean it does not exist. It could be a bad style of play. It could be an inefficient style of play. But that style is always there. So it is only subject to interpretation between you and I, whether we understand it or not. So also try to always remember that. Okay. Violet responding and said, but Maresca left us at 5th position, but Chelsea fans, they are saying Maresca wasn't good enough. Now, exactly. If he wasn't good enough, he was 5th at literally the halfway point of the season before his departure. What happened eventually was Chelsea ending up finishing 10th. Was that his doing? Do you suggest that had he stayed, and this is for Cairo, for him to ponder about, had he stayed, Chelsea would have still finished at 10th? I wouldn't want to think so. Okay. Then the other is Viola responding to Cairo. You say you didn't like Maresca. Ian McKenna saying, fucking last minute, a penalty. Hi, McKenna. Now, that was painful. That was disappointing. That was I'm trying to find the perfect word for it. It was demotivating or demoralizing, especially for a Newcastle fan, especially for a penalty that for me felt a bit easy or soft. Now, oftentimes we find ourselves caught up in this debate of what's a soft foul, what isn't, It is often very subjective because it is not definitive. A foul is a foul. some people want to argue. But I've always said that sins are not equal, even though the Bible that I read says that. I do not believe sins are equal. Why? If you come and steal this pen of mine, I cannot equate you to somebody that comes into my house and then murders me. Society cannot equate the two of you. That's why if there is a chicken thief on the village, chances are high he's not going to be stoned in the middle of the streets of the village. But if there is a rapist, a child rapist, or a defiler, or a murderer on the village, chances are high he will be stoned in the streets of the village. In other words, all sins are not equal. So, in the context of the penalty itself, it felt a bit soft. There was contact between the two players, but since it is not a clear and obvious error from the referee, VAR were not inclined to intervene. They did intervene to the extent of saying, we have reviewed this, there's no clear and obvious error from the referee, we'll let the decision stand. Now, on the VAR part and its unlikely intervention or unwanted intervention, that was okay for me. But it did feel a bit soft, kind of. I don't know what Newcastle fans have to think of it. You know, I've not been able to catch their reaction, at least online. Elche had Joan Garcia scrambling there for a moment. Anyways, okay. Cairo says, look at Klopp. He left a style of play. That's why Slot won the league. Maresca left us with nothing. We now have to rebuild. First and foremost, the manager you're making reference to was at Liverpool for nearly 9 years. He comes in October 2015, and he leaves in 2024. 9 years, thereabout. When you look at the first 2 years of Jurgen Klopp, I often make reference to an ardent Liverpool fan, a lady. She's also a sports journalist and a pundit, TV presenter / called Fifi Fiona Pinky. Liverpool fans were so fed up of Jurgen Klopp at the start of his journeys at Liverpool, and I'm not talking about his first campaign. I think going through the second campaign, that he was dubbed a motivational coach. That all he knew was to hug players at every end of the game, and he had nothing good coming for him. That was their belief. But after 9 years, when they won the UEFA Champions League, when they won the Premier League title, when they won the FA Cup and the Carabao Cup, I think they won the Carabao Cup twice under his tenure, they had something to count on his name. Now, you're talking about Enzo Maresca not leaving a style of play after a season and a half. If you asked Liverpool fans, had Jurgen Klopp left after a season and a half, I don't think they would have had many kind words for him, because he would have left Liverpool in a worse position, possibly, than he found them under Brendan Rodgers. Because the season prior to him joining, Brendan Rodgers had seen Liverpool finish second in the Premier League club after conceding the Premier League title to Manchester City. That's 2013-2014. So, that's food for thought. Okay. Boss Royal, you say there are two sides to every story. That's true. So, that's why I told you I am analyzing Chelsea's situation based on the information that was fed to us as the public through the media. It is okay for us to have contrary views, to say, I have a theory, because that will be your personal theory, because it is not backed by any facts. You know? But between you and your conspiracy theory, based on what was reported and my assessment of it, I am sorry, I'm inclined to believe more what the journalists that report about Chelsea matters and beyond did report at the time of the reporting, as opposed to what you may have as a conspiracy theory for what you think actually happened behind the scenes. That's all I'm simply saying. So it's okay for us to disagree on the interrogation of facts that did happen. That's okay. Okay. Then you said I thought bought Estevao after the World Cup, after the Club World Cup. No. I'm talking about him being used during the course of the season because he joined them after the Club World Cup. So from Pyramids. Was it Pyramids? Yes. He joins after the Club World Cup. So that's true. So say it's a conspiracy, but why did Maresca apologize on Instagram? Okay. Let me get to that in a bit. If it's true what you're saying, then why were Chelsea giving compensation by Manchester City, and why Maresca forced to post an Instagram post? Now, my understanding of Enzo Maresca's contract was, if the club sacked him, the club would have owed him compensation, which is often the case. When a club sacks you, they've terminated a contract prematurely. Right? So, if the contract is terminated prematurely, you deserve compensation depending on the terms and conditions as per the exit clauses of that contract. Now, the reverse could also be true. Also, only that managers do not pay clubs. I'll give you an example. When Graham Potter was sacked by Chelsea, Chelsea were obligated to pay him until when he found his next job. And even you, after finding your next job, so the contract could say something like this: if we sack you after 1 year and you're on a 6-year contract, we will continue paying you your wages until you find a new job. In other words, if you find a job a month after you've been sacked, then the club will cease paying your wages, but could owe you a certain total package as compensation package, but not to the full extent of the contract for which was left on your contract because you have now a new job. It also happened with recently Ruben Amorim when he was sacked at Manchester United because he got a job at AC Milan. Man United were bound to pay him, I think, around £15 million, but they ended up paying much less because he's gotten a job with AC Milan. Now, back to understanding, or my understanding of Enzo Maresca's contract. And again, it's not biblical truth. I'm simply giving you my assessment of it based on the execution as I interpreted it to be. So, because Enzo Maresca stepped down, the club did not owe him wages. Now, two things. He stepped down, and then in less than a year, he's getting a job at Manchester City. So, depending on the terms and conditions precluded in his contract, I'll give you an example. I already told you that he had reported to the club that in October and in December 2025, through intermediaries, Manchester City had approached him. So, it could be that his contract stated, if you end up with a job, for people that were tapping you, really, you are still working for us, they have to pay compensation to us. In other words, it's the equivalent of terminating your contract to go elsewhere, which would be sort of a buyout clause. I think Chelsea paid, was it about £10 million or more to Brighton when they were getting Graham Potter out. Now, that was direct because Graham Potter was still in the job. In this particular case, the circumstance is different, that Enzo Maresca stepped down and he's crossing over to Man City in less than in less than a year. So, certain conditions, terms and conditions, are what qualify for that. Mind you, Chelsea, we're not taking Man City to court to say, you tapped our employee and they stepped down and you've given them the job. No, I'm simply saying, if you're appointing this guy, because based on his contract, this is what you ought to pay us. And they ended up paying something about 17 million pounds, which Man City agreed to pay. If Enzo Maresca had convinced Manchester City that his contract spoke otherwise, I'm sure it would have gone to an independent tribunal or before the Premier League, whatever, the committee would have been responsible for that. There's a case I'm trying to follow up on. I'm yet to grasp all the details. But Jean-Philippe Mateta did appeal to FIFA, and FIFA have since told him the matter is beyond their jurisdiction because he is contesting the remaining months of the validity of the remaining months of his contract with Crystal Palace. So contracts can be detailed. They can include all sorts of things or mechanisms when it comes to how different situations can be envisioned and how they will be dealt with should they arise, you know? So that's what I'll say about that. Okay, the Man City off to a great start. Rev Kaliba, in terms of their performance, I don't think that was a great start. They were very, very lucky that they managed to record the win. And I think they will take it for what it is to say, yeah, 3 points in the bag, but that performance needs to improve as soon as yesterday. And part of the reason as why it needs to improve, first of all, I faulted Enzo Maresca for how he set up his team. First of all, you have a Josh Kovadio, Ruben Diaz, Kushanov, and Rocco Royce in your backline. Then you decide to put McKay in midfield alongside Elliot Anderson. You're playing McKay as your holding midfielder at the expense of a player like Nico Gonzalez, who is on the bench. Now, Mateo Kovacic may no longer be at his best, and he's a conversation of yesterday in regards to being at his best. But I think as a central midfielder, he's still miles better than McKay. Although McKay ended up scoring the equalizer in the 84th minute, it does not mean he had a good performance. I wouldn't persuade myself into believing so. Then he had Nico O'Reilly playing as his playmaker. Why are you leaving Ryan Cherki on the bench as your playmaker? Unless some of these players had maybe injury issues or concerning issues during the course of the week in training. Other than that, there's not much that could justify that. It is understandable if Manchester City do not want to risk Nico Gonzalez because they think they are going to sell him. There's interest from Newcastle. I would understand that because we have seen the likes of Bradley Bacola being left out of the PSG squad. We've seen the same thing happen with Gabriel Martinelli at Arsenal and Gabriel Jesus. Why? Because the club believes they're going to trade these players and therefore they do not want to risk them getting injured. I would understand that explanation. But for Ryan Cherki, Mateo Kovacic, even Matthias Fernandes, who we know is a central midfielder, may not be a holding midfielder, but a central midfielder nonetheless, naturally. So I found that quite suspicious, you know. So then Brad Erling Haaland did not have a good day in office, but I did not think Manchester City entirely had a good day in office, really, in my humble assessment of the game in itself. Even though they managed to snatch it with that late winner by Josh Kovadio, you know, brilliant, sort of a goal that he scored to secure all 3 points for his home side that had an XG of 2.36 with 13 shots on goal and 6 on target compared to 4 from Bournemouth, whose XG was a mere 0.63. Meanwhile, Anthony Gordon has come on in here for Karim. Danny Olmo has come on for Karim Adeyemi, and then Anthony Gordon has also come on for Lamine Yamal. Let's see how Barcelona look with those two on the turf. Okay. Let me review. Okay, this was Alan Okello to Man United. We are tired of a loss. Alan Samuel. Alan Okello has just made his transfer to that club. Is it in Tunisia? Is it Tunisia or Morocco? I think Morocco. I stand to be corrected, but he's just made that transfer from Young Africans in Tanzania. So he will. But anyways, I know it's all for banter. But Man United will be okay. You see, the thing about Man United that I will say about them is that the result was not entirely consummate with the performance. It's one of those days when you have a good performance. Okay, it wasn't so good a performance by the Man United standards, but it wasn't as horrible, you know. But because they were unable to score or and eventually pick up a point, it then looks worse than it actually looks. You know, there's what you get on eye test, and then there's what you see on what the data tells you. I'll give you an example. Mesut Ozil was one of those players that was accused of being lazy. He had a lazy body language. But if you interrogated the data, he ran than most players. He worked harder than most players. So sometimes I understand where that comes from. So say it's a conspiracy, but why did Maresca apologize on Instagram? I mean, that's all PR. Meanwhile, Barcelona have scored the third through the Brazilian Rafinha. Must be exciting to be out there. Anyway, I'm sure Pedro is out there watching the game. But a beautiful goal by Rafinha. The truth will soon be revealed. I mean, I don't know what truth we should wait for. But what comes out later does not necessarily guarantee that it is always the truth. Anthony Gordon with an assist on his La Liga debut. Brilliant pass. Quite brilliant. And the way Rafinha slots it to the near post. Quite brilliant. Simply brilliant. But yeah, so for Man City, I had questions. I had questions on their overall performance. Obviously, they dominated play in terms of possession to the tune of 66% compared to 34% of Bournemouth. But you felt that midfield wasn't clicking. It's not the kind of midfield that you'd field against a United. Now, or maybe another serious opponent. You feel that against Chelsea, they're going to rip you apart. You know? So, yeah, Enzo Maresca needs to get his craft together before big matches begin to come around. And it won't be long until such a time that they begin to float in. Because what will happen is that Champions League will soon be around the corner. Now, the beauty for it is that his next engagement is going to be away to Crystal Palace, who lost to Everton by 2-0 against Everton in the opening weekend. But he will need to fix his house. Similarly, I would say the same thing for Man United. But like I said, do not be too alarmed. Man United are going to be at home next Sunday at 6:30 p.m. at Old Trafford against Ipswich Town. So, you know. Anyways, let's review the other results from Super Sunday. Because Super Sunday also gave us some other results, including Aston Villa being walloped by 4-0. They looked shambolic. And Joe Gomez getting a red card, I mean, that's just a stupid reaction. Okay, yes, you've been tackled. You're pissed about it. But why are you raising your foot to kick your opponent in the stomach? Excuse me. You know? Oh. Danny Olmo. Has a cheeky pass from Rafinha, but Danny Olmo could not get it on target. So, Joe Gomez, that was entirely his fault. So, Aston Villa's midfield, looked beaten. Boubacar Kamara in there, Joe Gomez, Ross Barkley, John McKean, Emi Buendia, Hammings. I mean, not the most elite of teams. Victor Lindelof alongside Pau Torres, Matty Cash, and Ian Matson. First and foremost, it's goal number 4 for Barcelona, and it is Anton Gordon with the second assist of the game. He literally could have scored for himself, but he decided to pass it. Brilliant goal from Fermin Lopez, shot 7. But that was an electric run. Oh, come on, Elche. You cannot play that sort of high line. Nah, that's too deep. Beyond your own half, really? What kind of high line is that? Against Barcelona, who you know have very electric forwards? Unless you did not do any homework on Antonio Gordon. Unless you've not been watching Rafinha. Like really. So, Brighton having a beautiful game. A goal from Max Di Copia. Then another was scored by Jack Henschelwood, plus an own goal by Victor Lindelof. Jack Henschelwood scored 2 goals in a space of 2 minutes. In the 30th minute and the 31st minute. So he scored and they won. Eventually they won 4-0. I thought in the second half, they were more disciplined. Aston Villa, they brought in the likes of Tyrone Mings, Matteo Ruggeri, who they recently signed from Atletico de Madrid, had made his debut. Garnacho was brought on. Lamare Bogard was brought on. But let's wait and see. Then Oli Watkins was omitted from the matchday squad. He's told the club he wants to leave amidst enormous interest from Al Hilal in the Saudi Pro League, who are under the charges of former Inter Milan manager, that is Simone Inzaghi. He's their target for a striker. Apparently, Karim Benzema could move on. And then, okay, let's not go into the transfers before we wrap up the Premier League Super Sunday action, because there was another game that was between Liverpool and Newcastle. Liverpool, I mean, yeah, they still have some things to fix. Riongo Moha on the right is not going to give you what you need. It may take quite some time. You remember what I was advocating for? That he must sacrifice one of the midfield trio between Alexis McAllister, Gravenberch, and Dominic Szoboszlai. It was McAllister that was sacrificed to create room for Fran Wirtz in as the 10 behind Alexander Isak, as opposed to playing him off of the wing. And then Cody Gakpo, who is also a target for Tottenham Hotspurs, was in there. Milos Kakes, Virgil van Dijk, Jeremy Jacquet, and Jeremy Frimpong. Now, Frimpong looked good going forward, you know. Then Yohan Wissa, I thought he looked a bit sharp, although he did not score. I thought he looked sharp, quite very energetic. Willian Osula should do more, better. Joe Willock came off the bench to score what was the second goal, but Anthony Elanga on the counter-attack, I mean, has a beautiful goal in the 50th minute, you know, and then Cody Gakpo in the 55th minute scoring to restore parity, but then Joe Willock with that goal that separated the two sides before the late penalty. Rafinha was denied here, but maybe the goal wouldn't have stood for offside. He just veered away a little too fast. Rafinha. Alexander Isak still is yet to find his footing, you know. He's yet to find his footing. Meanwhile, there's a hydration break, a cooling break in La Liga. You know, so yeah. I mean, that goal by Anthony Langa was beautiful, beautiful, beautiful to watch. I thought, come on, Arsenal Ramsey Baker, maybe you should be commanding your goal better than that. Then Hornicic is, I think he's called Hornicic, something like that. The Newcastle goalkeeper. They've just signed him this summer. He had Hornicic, yes. I thought he had a good day in office. He did his absolute best. There's that attempt from Florian Wirtz that he saved. When you look at the goal he concedes, he almost sees it a little bit late through a forest of legs. You know. But then Liverpool, they did not deal with that counter well. Florian Wirtz and Dominic Szoboszlai should have dealt with Johan Wissa a bit better, you know. Should have dealt with him a bit better before he carried through. Anyways, so, and then they considered a penalty, and the referee pointed to the spot. I think it was Victor Munoz who was brought down by Lewis Hall. He's the one that brought him down, and you know, he scored. Dominic Szoboszlai converted the resultant free penalty, and it finished 2-2. So they'll be delighted that they were able to walk away with a point, but it had not looked so pretty for Newcastle. Monday Night Football will come as Chelsea take on Fulham. Chelsea away to Craven Cottage. So that will seal match day 1 of the Premier League ahead of match day 2. So, anyways, quickly, let's look at what's happened elsewhere. I'll just be giving you the results, not going into the analysis of what transpired in other leagues. But Atletico de Madrid and Villarreal shared the spoils in a 2-2 draw. Getafe beat up against Racing Santander by a 0-0, while Barcelona, as we speak, are leading 4-0 against Elche. Juventus managed to beat up against Frosinone by 0-0, while Venezia lost to Lecce by 2-0. As we speak, Atlanta are 2-1 up against Sassuolo, while AC Milan, not as we speak. Those games have already concluded. I don't know why my page is giving me, okay, yes. Atalanta beat up against Sassuolo by 2-1, while AC Milan also beat up against Torino by a similar scoreline. In the French League 1, Lille beat up against Angers by 2-0, while Le Havre lost to Monaco by 0-0. PSG and Stade Rennes shared the spoils in a 2-2 draw as the league returns. Meanwhile, Fermin Lopez has just scored his second goal of the evening, and Barcelona are leading Elche by 5-0. Must be fun being a Barcelona fan. You know, they score plenty of goals, by the way. But Elche have looked so shambolic, trying to play the Barcelona way using that high defensive line. It's never going to work. Oh, what a turn. Defenders should be doing better. It's 5-0 in favor of Barcelona. Anyways, moving on. You know, transfer news or gossip or what the rumor mill has. Al Hilal are in talks with Arsenal over a potential move for Gabriel Martinelli. And apparently they are willing to pay more than 45 million euros, which Galatasaray had offered for the 25-year-old Brazilian international, who Arsenal have put on the market. according to the Hand of Arsenal, he was informed that the club would be parting ways with him. He had a meeting with Mikel Arteta, during which he was informed that he's surplus to requirements. And there's been a trending letter of him on Instagram that he put out. Now, according to David Austin, he said, Al Hilal pursuing a deal to sign Gabriel Martinelli from Arsenal. No agreement yet, but talks ongoing between clubs, plus 25-year-old winger. Arsenal want a fee in the region of £60 million, plus Brazil international open to Al Hilal possibility after turning down Turkey. Remember, he turned down a possibility of moving to Turkey with Galatasaray, but is open to making the move to Al Hilal in the Saudi Pro League. Apparently, they put on table a very, very fat offer for him in terms of what he will be earning in terms of wages. We are talking about a player who joined Arsenal in July 2019. So he's been at the club for 7 years, and he's been a diligent servant. He hasn't always lived to the bidding in terms of living up to the full expectations in terms of his performances, but the one thing you cannot question is his overall contribution, or at least being loyal to the club. So according to the Hand of Arsenal, he said Mikel was direct with Martinelli about his squad status, hence a player stance change in being open to clubs outside the top 5 leagues. Arsenal had informally offered that's Gabriel Martinelli, to Juventus for Kenan plus money, who remains a future target. Arsenal remain active for the right player in the transfer window. Now, Arsenal have interest in Juventus's Kenan Yildiz, but apparently Juventus have closed the door on the Turkish international's exit. So, but yeah, Arsenal looking for a marquee signing in there. In the transfer window. In other words, if they move on Gabriel Martinelli, they'll be looking for somebody to fill that left wing. We know that they've made inquiries to the effect of Julian Alvarez and things like that, but we'll have to wait and see how things go down to that effect or in that regard. Regarding him, then Manchester City did reach an agreement with Lille to sign Ayubu Bouadi. The deal for the 18-year-old Lille midfielder is worth 95 million euros as guaranteed fees, plus 5 million euros in bonuses on a 5 plus 1 year contract. That means it's a 5-year contract with an option to extend it for a further year. By the time that one elapses, he's about what? 24, thereabouts. Manchester City land the Moroccan international key target following Rodri's departure. That's according to David Austin, who also did report that Aston Villa had made contact with club roots over Jorel Odunzi. The 22-year-old Ecuadorian centre-back is among options to bolster the centre-back, position following the departure of Ezri Konsa. Still, there's no deal for Tyler Woods-Bills from Southampton. I think that's the player that Aston Villa are targeting. So. The story for Gabriel Martinelli is one to watch closely in as far as the coming days of the transfer window are concerned. Meanwhile, RB Leipzig have reached a verbal agreement to sign Christopher Nkunku from AC Milan. It's a here we go, according to Fabrizio Romano. Documents being exchanged now after deal in place for 3.5 million euros as loan fees, plus a buy option clause slightly under 30 million euros. Nkunku wanted Leipzig deal. The deal has been agreed now in principle. We know that Newcastle were the other team that were interested in his services. Then also Alan Maturo to Shakhtar Donetsk. The deal is set to be agreed for 5.5 million euros plus 1 million euros in expected add-ons. The defender will be joining them from Genoa. Then today, Ferran Torres did score a brace on his debut for Paris Saint-Germain. So that's a really, really brilliant news for Ferran Torres. Then Espanyol are closing in on a deal to sign Bran Zaragoza. from Bayern Munich. So that one is one to watch. Then, so I told you about Oli Watkins. He's asked at Aston Villa that he be allowed to leave. Then today, in the aftermath of their 2-2 draw between Villarreal and Atletico de Madrid, while the Atletico de Madrid players went over to the fans to clap for them, thank for them for their love and support, Julian Alvarez walked down straight to tunnel, and Diego Simeone, in defending the action, he said it was a club decision not to let Julian go over with his teammates to greet the fans. Raymond Kangumba says, hi, Nico Gonzalez should sign for Newcastle for £45 million. Well, we'll wait and see if they can reach an agreement. Then also, wait, did I read correctly? Let me see if I can find that report. Yes, Tottenham Hotspur did reach an agreement with Manchester City over the transfer of Omar Mamouche. It's a here we go, according to Fabrizio Romano. Verbal agreement done on initial loan with a buy clause to become mandatory under certain conditions at £50 million. Mamouche said yes to Tottenham days ago. Travel and medical set for Monday. Remember, Manchester City signed him in January 2025 for a fee of about 59 point something million pounds from RB Leipzig. Is it Leipzig? I think so. Anyways, so yeah, all that is happening. Then Atletico de Madrid president, that is Cerezo, on Julian Alvarez and Barcelona, said, what I consider is that Barcelona wasn't up to the circumstances and didn't do what is normally done in this kind of situation. Looks like that hullabaloo will continue, because he also said after a fairly complicated summer marked by incessant questions about Julian Alvarez, the fact that he's an Atletico de Madrid player, he's always been an Atletico de Madrid player. We never had any intention of selling him. So we'll wait and see. Circumstances change, things change, depending, but hopefully. Now, apparently, Arsenal want £60 million for Gabriel Martinelli. If they were able to milk that out of Al Hilal for Gabriel Martinelli, even if it were to be £50 million, he would stand to be Arsenal's most expensive sale in the club's history. And they signed him for quite small. Was it about £6 million coming in from the 4th division in Brazil back in 2019? I'm sure, Arsenal fans have good memories of him. Then Palermo have agreed a deal to sign Mattia Perini as the new goalkeeper from Juventus. So that one is also happening. So plenty of deals happening. We'll discuss more of this in the morning for our morning action. But as we speak, Barcelona are still 5 up against Elche. You've been such a wonderful audience. Thank you so much, Raymond Kangumba, Viola, Boss Royal, Cairo, Rev Caliber, and every single one of you that has been part of tonight's podcast. Stay blessed. Until next time. Bye-bye for now.